Elagabalus, the Roman emperor who turned the palace into a brothel and married a Vestal Virgin. Think you know Rome's rulers? Think again. Our madman Elagabalus, originally known as Sextus Varius Avitus Bassianus, was born around 204 AD. Quite a mouthful, right? Well, there are going to be a lot of those. You see, he had ties to Emperor Caracala, which, in the grand scheme of things, should have been a golden ticket, but life's never that simple, especially for royalty. Caracala faced a rather dramatic exit from the world stage. Read assassination. And our young Elagabalus and his family were promptly shown the door. Banished. Ouch. But here's where things get juicy. At the ripe age of 14, with a little nudge from his ambitious mother and grandmother, and some fortunate circumstance, he found himself wearing the enormous shoes of an emperor. Can you imagine? While most of us were struggling with acne, voice cracks, and even daring to speak to our high school crush, Elagabalus ruled an empire. But how does a teenager previously banished suddenly ascend to one of the most powerful positions in the world? Two things: connections and a bit of divine intervention, or so they claimed. You see, Elagabalus was said to be the living incarnation of a god. But here is what historians agree happened. Caracala was usurped and assassinated by Macrinus, who exiled Elagabalus, his mother and grandmother, to Syria. They did not stay long, however, as they immediately got to planning a civil war. It was a quick affair. Many of Macrinus's reforms were unpopular, and the Third Legion, Gallica in particular, were especially resentful on account of the privileges stripped from them. A life pro tip: don't upset your employees too much, especially when they're an entire legion of your best troops. It was not long before other legions joined the rebellion, and Macrinus was executed while fleeing for Italy after losing one too many battles. Now, you might be wondering, how does a young god emperor spend his days? Organizing toga parties? Maybe some ancient Roman Mario Kart? Which, let's be honest, probably meant rigging and betting on chariot races. Well, not exactly. This is where the story takes a turn from the bizarre to the downright insane. But before we dive into the deep end of Elagabalus' reign, let's take a moment. Once more, imagine yourself at 14. Now, imagine being handed the keys to an empire. Pause the video for a moment and think about it. What would you do? Well, Elagabalus, with his family pulling the strings in the background, took to it like a fish to water, or more accurately, like a bull in a china shop. So, what followed? Well, scandals, religious controversies, and some decisions that would make even the most rebellious teenager look like the love child of a Tekashi 69 level snitch, and every teacher's pet ever. But let's unravel the madness that was Elagabalus' reign, and trust me, you'll want to hear about the whoopee cushions. Remember when you had that teenage phase where you were obsessed with something? Maybe it was a band, a hobby, or a particular fashion statement. Well, Elagabalus had a phase too, only his was a tad more spiritual. He was head over heels for the sun god Elagabal, from where he drew inspiration for his own name. And when I say devoted, I don't mean just lighting a candle or two. No, he became a full-on fanboy. In a move that would make any modern architect's jaw drop, he constructed a grand temple to Elagabal on the Palatine Hill. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of buying prime real estate for your favorite pop star's poster. But this wasn't just any temple, it was a monument to his beloved deity, to his very identity. Now, here's where things got dicey. Elagabalus thought, why not mix and match religions? He tried to force an amalgamation of religious practices. Imagine trying to blend coffee with orange juice because you think it's the next big thing. Unsurprisingly, this didn't sit well with the masses. Our young emperor wasn't content with just regular worship. He had to put on a show, dancing around his deity, his hubris visible to the masses, who quietly grew angrier and angrier with each display. Why the religious roller coaster? Was it genuine devotion, a political move, or just teenage rebellion on a grand scale? Whatever it was, it's clear that Elagabalus wasn't one to do things by halves. Whether ruling an empire or worshipping a god, he went all in. But as with all tales of madmen, there are twists and turns, and Elagabalus' story is no exception. Aside from his religious eccentricities, you might think that Elagabalus would focus on his imperial duties. Nope, not at all. Our young ruler had a personal life that was, let's just say, as colourful as his religious fervour. Elagabalus was an emperor with insatiable lust. He had countless partners, and when I say countless, I mean it. It was as though he was trying to get some kind of ancient record. As mentioned earlier, this is why he practically turned his palace into a brothel. His love life was truly mind-boggling. Now, here's where things get even more intriguing. Our dear emperor had a penchant for cross-dressing. And not just the occasional toga swap. Some historians even speculate he might have identified as transgender. And then there was Hierocles, a male slave. But to Elagabalus, he wasn't just any slave, he was his husband. Yep, you heard that right. In a society where traditional roles were pretty rigid, this was the equivalent of swimming in raw sewerage while cuddling a 2-week-old roasted goat. How did the public react to his unconventional behaviors and relationships? Well, let's just say it wasn't far from the controversy we see in the world today. The Roman populace, known for their love of gossip, had a field day. The whispers, the rumors, the side-eyes, it was all there. Speaking of rumors, there were tales of his extravagant sexual escapades that would make even Caligula raise an eyebrow. We'll need to spare your details for YouTube's sake. From wild orgies to intimate encounters in the palace's hidden chambers, Elagabalus was the talk of the town. From scandalous personal affairs, we now delve deeper into the realm of sheer decadence. Elagabalus, ever the unconventional emperor, had an appetite for luxury that was unparalleled in his time. Is anyone watching surprised at this point? The opulence of his reign was especially evident in his grand feasts and gatherings. These weren't just meals, they were events, where the elite of Rome gathered, not just to dine, but to witness the emperor's latest display of extravagance. And while tales of him inventing the whoopee cushion might lean more towards legend than fact, it gives a glimpse into the kind of stories that circulated about his unique sense of entertainment. In the halls of leadership, where meritocracy should have been the norm, Elagabalus did not care in the slightest. Officials were sometimes chosen not for their expertise or wisdom, but for more superficial attributes. This deviation from tradition further distanced him from the Roman elite. And then there's the matter of the brothels. While many rulers might discreetly indulge in such establishments, Elagabalus took it a step further. He didn't just visit. There are accounts that he immersed himself in the experience, blurring the lines between emperor and commoner. Whether through personal choices or administrative decisions, he was a ruler who consistently defied conventions. As we explore his reign, it becomes clear that his life was not just about excesses, but also about pushing boundaries in an empire deeply rooted in tradition. In the shadowy corridors of power, it was becoming increasingly clear Elagabalus' reign was a ticking time bomb, not only for the empire, but for his personal allies. His debauched personality, while initially a source of intrigue, was now a liability. The very traits that once set him apart were now, expectedly, sowing the seeds of his downfall. The Senate, long a bastion of Roman tradition, watched with growing alarm. Their patience, worn thin by the emperor's antics, was nearing its end. The murmurs of discontent, once hushed whispers in dimly lit chambers, had grown into a cacophony of dissent. The public, too, was restless. The emperor's flamboyance, once celebrated, now seemed a mockery of the Roman ideals they held dear. But a storm wasn't just brewing outside the palace walls. Within the imperial family, tensions were reaching a boiling point. Julia Maesa, the grandmother who once championed Elagabalus' rise to power, found herself at odds with him. Whether it was his erratic decisions or the looming threat of revolt, Their bond was fracturing. And then there was the matter of Severus Alexander, Elagabalus's cousin. In a dark twist of familial rivalry, Elagabalus hatched a plot to eliminate him. It was a testament to the emperor's growing paranoia and desperation. Yet, for all his plots and schemes, Elagabalus couldn't escape his fate. In a grimly poetic turn of events, those he trusted most, his own soldiers, became the instruments of his demise. Some accounts say that the Praetorian Guard cornered him in the most undignified of places, the restrooms. Regardless, the aftermath is well known. He and his mother's corpses were beheaded, stripped naked, and dragged through the city before Elagabalus' body was thrown into the Tiber River. The emperor's end was as ignominious as it was brutal.